Gorgo emi, ha basileia sta Spartas.
I'm shocked.
Spartiates kalos eiesan.
I'm actually impressed, guys. Kairete o agatoi, or should I say, o lisanioi. Today we're going to talk about the ancient Greek spoken in the game Civilization VI. And this time we're going to talk about the Spartan character, the Queen Gorgo, and find out, is her pronunciation of ancient Greek actually authentic? Does it sound like ancient Greeks or even ancient Spartans actually talked? Let's find out together. I'm Luke, and this is polýMATHY.
Ουκανέιε ατέικιστος πόλης χάτης άντρεση, καί ου πλήνθοις εστεπάνωται.
Wow, okay. So, this is amazing for two reasons, really surprising, and for another two reasons, kind of like, oh, why? Let me explain. So, this, incredibly, is actually a quote from an actual Spartan in history. Now, this is what I heard. Boukanie atekistos polis hatis andresi, kai uplinthos, and it should be tha, uplinthos estepanotai. Now, the first word I hear is bou, but there's definitely something wrong with either what I'm hearing or what was said, because this is an actual quote from Plutarch about the life of Lycurgus, an actual Spartan, who said, according to Plutarch, Boukanie atekistos polis hatis andresi, or in fact, plinthois. We'll talk about that in a second. A city will not be unfortified, which is wreathed by men and not by bricks. I like to use the word wreathed instead of protected or surrounded, because surrounded almost sounds like you're being attacked. But this is what made Sparta so incredible and unique. It didn't have protective city walls. Instead, it had just its soldiers to protect the unfortified city. Famously, the Spartan soldiers were really good at fighting.
Spartans! What is your profession?
So the first two words shouldn't be bukan, which would be contraction for bukaian, where even would there be.
Ουκανέιε ατέικιστος πόλης χάτης άντρεση.
But I think what I'm actually hearing is the click sound.
Ουκανέιε.
And it just sounds like a b because of the two sounds together. I hear bu at the beginning of a sentence. I'm used to speaking ancient Greek. And bu, where? You know, it's the beginning of a sentence. But uk makes much more sense because it's just the entire quote written by Plutarch, supposedly something that Lycurgus actually said. Now what I'm going to do is eliminate that very first sound in the recording here, which I think is just a click sound, or it might be the letter pi, the b. But anyway, let's get rid of it and hear it again.
Ουκανέιε ατέικιστος πόλης χάτης άντρεση, καί ου πλήνθοις εστεπάνωται.
So the other reason that I love this is that it's naturally written in Doric, in the Doric or Laconic dialect of ancient Greek. Go see my ancient Greek dialects video if you want to learn more about the beautiful complexity of all the ancient Greek dialects in the classical period. There are three words that really demonstrate the Doricity of this, which is hatis instead of hatis, simply means which, it's feminine, and andresi instead of andrasin, which would be Attic. Classical Attic is the dialect which develops into koine, or kini for you modern Greek speakers. And speaking of modern Greek speakers, it's pretty obvious that the voice actress here is in fact Greek. You can hear it from the oral posture and from certain characteristics of the accent. But what's interesting, one of those other two really good points, is she's attempting to use a reconstructed pronunciation for Doric, which is incredible. And how do I know she's really trying? Well, listen to how she says estepanotai.
Καί ου πλήνθοις εστεπάνωται.
She doesn't say estefanote. She says estepanotai. So the letter phi or p, she's pronouncing as just like the letter pi, like B instead of P. To learn more about aspirated versus unaspirated consonants, see this video. So at least there's that attempt to make it closer to pa, even though maybe she doesn't understand how to do that. Clearly she doesn't. But hey, it's on the right track. She's not using the modern Greek pronunciation. Probably she received some kind of text that was in Greek letters, and she was told to pronounce it just like modern Greek, but it was spelled differently than the way that the ancient Greek here, that I've transcribed from Plutarch, is actually spelled. Thus she couldn't get it wrong. That is, to use modern Greek pronunciation to represent the ancient language would be, of course, wrong, technically. But she does say plinthois, and not plynthis. She says plynthos. Now, why is that outstanding? Because we know from a variety of different sources, both from inscriptional evidence, as well as how Aristophanes made fun of Doric speakers, of the Spartans, that the theta gets represented by a sigma. We see all manner of Spartan characters in Aristophanes' plays say, Naidasio, yes, by the two gods. It's the duel. You see, you needed to learn the duel. It should be to theo if it were Attic, but it's sio. What is this sigma representing? The universal consensus is this is almost certainly representing the sound th, which in Classical Attic, they didn't have a th, but they did have the sigma sound. So like the French philosopher who says, that's probably the exact thing, in reverse, that we're reading in Aristophanes. Tosio probably would be pronounced by the actor as to theo, and any decent reconstruction of the pronunciation of Aristophanes should pronounce it that way. To theo, because the actors had heard Spartan, they know that it was th, they just used a sigma to write it on the page. So at least the letter theta had made that transition from t to th in the Doric dialect. This, of course, shows us how Classical Attic definitely had t for theta and not th. And while Doric did have this pronunciation very early in the history of the ancient Greek language, it would be hundreds of years before it would really show up again in any kind of relevant inscriptional evidence, certainly outside of that laconic geographical area. Specifically in Pompeii. See this video to learn more about that. Because the general pronunciation for most of the history of ancient Greek, including the Koine period, is that theta was in fact just ta, retaining the Classical Attic pronunciation, which was the general pronunciation in most of Greece, in most of the Greek dialects. So this is remarkable. We have oi, and we have ai. But now we get to the part that I don't like. We also have a. Oh no. So whoever wrote the reconstructed text here in a way that the modern Greek speaker would be able to understand it, also probably wrote diareses over the iota in plynthos and in estepanotai, and also probably, unfortunately, in atekistos, which ended up sounding like ateikistos. Let's hear her again.
Ukaneie ateikistos polýMATHY andresi.
She also says eie instead of ie. Why is this a problem? Well, that's because epsilon iota is not a diphthong. See my video and pretty much every other one I've made about ancient Greek pronunciation to learn that really, 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 really important fact about the pronunciation of, well, the ancient Greek language from every point of history, from the classical all the way to the present. So it's not ateikistos. Such a shame that she could have just used a long a sound and would have sounded great. The other thing that's not so great about this pronunciation, as is done here, is that she is a modern Greek speaker, which means you're going to get all sorts of other things totally wrong. And that includes, for example, like we mentioned, that the letter phi or p in estepanotai, we don't hear the pa, we only hear pa, as if it's just the letter p, just the letter pi on its own. And similarly with the word unfortified, unwalled, ateikistos, we hear ateikistos, as if it's just a kappa, instead of the letter ki or kai.
Ukaneie ateikistos polýMATHY andresi, kai ou plynthos estepanotai.
However, I am still very pleased and very impressed that there was clearly a concerted effort to do something really cool. And also, I just want to say, I recognize this quote just by hearing it. I didn't notice until after I bothered to transcribe it that this was, hey, this is got to be that Plutarch quote from Lycurgus, and saw that it says right down here, a city is well fortified, which has a wall of men instead of brick. But I recognized it. I knew it. Trust me.
Gorgo έμι, χαβασιλέας τα Σπάρτας και χαγεμόν των Χελένων.
So yeah, she is Gorgo. And who was Gorgo? Gorgo was the wife of the famous Leonidas.
This is Sparta!
Yeah, that one. There she is. You've seen her before.
Spartan! Come back with your shield, or on it.
That is an actual Spartan quote, too.
Gorgo έμι, χαβασιλέας τα Σπάρτας και χαγεμόν των Χελένων.
Gorgo here is called a queen. Technically, didn't really have queens in that sense until the Hellenistic period for Sparta. but that's okay. Now I hear Gorgo emi.
Gorgo emi.
Now, what that means is that the person who gave the text to the voice actress had inserted a couple of handy kappas in order to give the right sound according to the modern Greek spelling convention. So it's gorgo instead of gorgo, which is what we would expect a modern Greek speaker to say, just reading the text as I've transcribed it here.
Gorgo emi.
The other thing I hear for sure is emi. So emi is emi in at least the Cretan dialect of the Doric dialect. That's right. Dialects within dialects within dialects. Just see this video and you'll understand. So emi is emi, meaning I am. In at least one Doric dialect, I don't know if it's attested elsewhere. I can't remember any occasions, but I hear emi. I don't hear emi. This voice actress is very consistently pronouncing epsilon iota as ei, which is of course wrong. So given that this doesn't sound wrong, I don't think she's doing emi, but emi.
Gorgo emi. Χαβασιλέας τα Σπάρτας.
But then we go in a different direction. I'm going to see what I think she is getting wrong here in a second. But I got to tell you, being able to hear all these different pronunciation things, I've got an ear for language, but it's not because I'm special. It's because I've spent years learning multiple foreign languages, ancient and modern alike. And if you want to get good at least one foreign language, if not several, then I strongly recommend this video sponsor, LingoPie. LingoPie is such an impressive tool to immerse yourself with content in multiple languages, even on the same day in the same hour if you want. It doesn't matter if you're advanced or beginner, with the subtitles and even English translation for these programs, you can know exactly what's going on and develop that ear for language.
Тебя на ночь начитался, вот и бредь. Да ты что, Геродот?
So much content available in so many different languages: Italian, Spanish, French, German, Portuguese, Japanese, Korean, Chinese, and Russian.
Дорогая Наталья, от имени президента Украины поздравляем вас с днем рождения.
Так багато дівчат, але я вибрав тебе. Тебе не любить моя мама.
And the fact that LingoPie now has Netflix integration makes it better than ever.
Все так запутано. Вы не думали, что некоторые отделы просто нужно реформировать?
Думали еще как думали, и поэтому создали департамент.
Direção à Praça da Liberdade.
Since I've had the opportunity to study at least a little bit of all 9 languages that LingoPie has to offer, it's been a fantastic way for me to make at least some small improvements in the languages that I don't know that well, dust off that German I haven't touched for years, and get better at understanding idiomatic expressions in Italian and Spanish. Getting input is the only way to learn a language, and the more comprehensible the better. LingoPie makes all the input as comprehensible as you need. Sign up today at learn.lingopie.com/Luke polýMATHY. Link in the description.
Τι είσαι εσύ. Τι να σνίκας χωιώστε εσύ αγγέλειν.
A lot of good stuff in here, and I'm excited that since the voice actress is doing such a good job trying to do whatever the script is telling her to do as far as the pronunciation is concerned, I understand what she's saying.
Gorgo emi. Χαβασιλέας τα Σπάρτας και χαγεμόν των Χελένων.
Well, what is she doing right and what is she doing wrong? Well, at least there's something inconsistent. And that's where she pronounces the word for hegemon, or leader, which is hegemon, as hegemon. Gamma plus a front vowel should be y in modern Greek pronunciation. Y, hegemon. But we know that the intention of the reconstructed pronunciation is to pronounce the gamma as g, because she pronounced her name as Gorgo a second ago and not Gorgo, not using the fricative r. Lovely as that sound is, we don't necessarily expect that in Doric. Now, what's very interesting is that modern Greek has 6 fricatives that came from letters that weren't in all fricatives in the classical period, at least in Classical Attic and most of the ancient Greek period. But those letters famously, of course, are the chi, theta, and phi, which in Classical Attic pronunciation are ke, theta, pe, ka, ta, pa, aspirated consonants. Those become ch, tha, fa by modern Greek, and indeed, in some places in antiquity, they were ch, tha, fa. Eventually, that became the majority pronunciation in some places in late antiquity. And also, the 3 voiced fricatives, ra, va, va, those came from ga, da, ba in the classical period. Now, did Doric have any ra, or the, or va, anything like that? While it's not beyond the realm of possibility that some Greek dialects in the classical period could have, there are tantalizing pieces of evidence for this. There isn't very good evidence that Spartiate Laconic, that Doric dialect of Sparta, would have necessarily had anything like that. She also said Vasileia. She says Vasileia, which is so unfortunate. It should be Basileia. Another thing that is just a problem with using purely modern Greek phonology is the long vowels are not well represented. Ta Spartas. This would be te Spartes in Classical Attic and in Koine, in fact. That is the genitive. He Basileia te Spartes. That would be the Classical Attic or Standard Ancient Greek version. A lot of etas, the heta letter, are alphas, alpha.
Τι είσαι εσύ, τι να σνίκας χωιός τεσί αγγέλειν.
Tisesi. Tisesi. So this is double sigma, so it needs to be long. Essi. Tisesi. So that's, again, a modern Greek pronunciation mistake. Geminates are, in fact, long, such as they are in the Cypriot dialect of modern Greek. Essi is the Doric for E in Classical Attic, which means you are. So tisi in Classical Attic, tisesi in Classical Doric.
Τι είσαι εσύ, τι να σνίκας χωιός τεσί αγγέλειν.
She says, Tinas nikas tizigas choyos tesi angelein. Sounds really cool. I mean, I love the way that modern Greek sounds, period. I also think ancient Greek with a modern Greek accent sounds really cool. But the pitch accent isn't well represented here. We have definitely the stress accent instead. And also we have the lack of the phonemic vowel length. Tinas nikas choyos tesi angelein. There you go. That's following the pitch accents more accurately. The final in is in and not ein. Oh, that's a terrible Erasmian thing. What a shame. Another thing that is very typical of modern Greek is to pronounce the sound h, as we have in English, as ch, because ch is the sound that exists for the letter chi or he in the modern Greek pronunciation in modern Greek. Thus, we have her say choios, which is wrong. And the reason we know that's wrong is that the H sound in ancient Greek, such as in ha, meaning the, and huios, and many, many other words, is often comes from a letter like a sigma or maybe a w. Anyway, it wouldn't make a ch sound. That wouldn't be the result in antiquity. It would in fact be the ever so delicate and weak sound of the letter H, just as we have in English. Ha. So ha, huios, and not the sound of he in modern Greek.
Τι είσαι εσύ, τι να σνίκας χωιός τεσί αγγέλειν.
Another characteristic of modern Greek is to palatalize the velar consonants, specifically he, kappa, gamma, as he, ke, and ye in a modern Greek pronunciation. Or in fact here, angel, she says, angel. I love the palatalization of velar consonants before front vowels. It sounds awesome. It was definitely happening in at least some isolated places in the Hellenistic period of Koine Greek. Probably not a universal phenomenon until a good deal later during the early to later Western Roman Empire. There's no reason to include it in a reconstruction of Doric. I'm pretty sure the voice actress wasn't coached on this point. Could Doric have had something like that? Could Attic have? There's no, you really have to look hard to find evidence to support such a thing. I love how it sounds, but I don't think there is enough evidence, meaning none, to support such a conclusion, certainly for Doric. We have a city nearby. Would you like to visit and sample our hearty black broth? There's no audio for this one. I just wanted to sound Greekish. We would love to sample your hospitality. Sorry, but not at this time.
Σπαρτιάτες καλώς εΐεσαν, καρτερός, ισκουρός, Ανδρέιος.
Wow, that sounds great. Now, what's so interesting here is I hear some long vowels. Let's hear that again.
Σπαρτιάτες καλώς εΐεσαν, καρτερός, ισκουρός, Ανδρέιος.
Wow, so many good things, so many strangely wrong things. So, the long vowel in Spartiates, both the a and the e, they're perfect, they're long. But unless I'm mistaken, if we want this to be Doric, the eta in Spartiates has to be Spartiatas. I don't think I'm wrong about that because look at names like Leonidas, which are very typical Doric names. The s, which is typical of Attic and Ionic, is as universally for those kinds of names. First declension masculine names or nouns.
Σπαρτιάτες καλώς είεσαν.
But it's long, which is great. And if we think about this character, she's a Doric speaker, but if she's trying to speak with Classical Attic speakers, like us, right? You speak Classical Attic, then she's trying to adapt to us. So there's a kind of a mixing of the dialects. In fact, there's a good precedence for this because in the plays by Aristophanes, we have Doric characters. In fact, a woman, Lampito, the Spartan lady, in the Lysistrate, hilarious, by the way. These characters are written in a way that demonstrates the Doric accent, probably exaggerated, and sometimes also combining normal Attic things. They're not necessarily consistent in every single word or probably pronunciation. It's an approximation mostly meant to be funny. This is also true of the literary Doric that wasn't meant to be funny, such as in the dramas and the tragedies by Aeschylus and Sophocles and Euripides, and even the Doric poetry of, say, Theocritus. So we don't really have a good representation of written Spartan, actually written by Spartans.
Καρτερός, ισκουρός, Ανδρέιος.
The other thing that sounds like it's absolutely an attempt to imitate the pronunciation of Classical Doric is we hear something that's pretty close to not iskyros, which would be Attic, but iskouros.
Καρτερός, ισκουρός, Ανδρέιος.
Hear that? She says iskouros, which is wrong because we don't get the aspirated k that we need, iskouros. So it should be a long vowel, but why is it not u as it is in Attic? Well, that's because the change of u to u, the fronting of that vowel, was a characteristic of at least the Attic dialect, but not the Doric dialect. We wouldn't expect it to occur there. So that's fantastic. Here I've written it as a Latin letter U so that you can see how it would be represented. But this is what it would normally look like in ancient Greek orthography. Iskouros instead of iskouros.
Καρτερός, ισκουρός, Ανδρέιος.
And the word Andreos, it should be Andreos. She says Andreios. Ugh. Wrong for both reasons. One, of course, that A sound. Even Sidney Allen has thought that maybe in front of vowels you'd get an A. I don't think so. I think he's wrong. I'll talk about that another time. And also the fact that she's using the modern Greek pronunciation of the delta as the. Could Doric have had that? Maybe. But there's, no evidence. You have to really do all kinds of crazy things to legitimize such a possibility.
Σπαρτιάτες καλώς είεσαν. Καρτερός, ισκουρός, Ανδρέιος.
One thing that I think is incorrect about the translation of the English into the ancient Greek, which is what, of course, happened in reality. The translator was tasked with translating the English. You would make a good Spartan, resilient, strong, and brave. The Karteros, Iskouros, awesome, and Andreios, those are fine. But Spartiates kalos, you would make a beautiful Spartan. But she says you would make a good Spartan. Now, kalos does mean good, but certainly the better adjective here would be agathos. Kalos is okay, but agathos is much better. Except, guess what agathos is in Doric? We even see this in Aristophanes. It's lisanios, lisanios. That's how I greeted you at the beginning of the video. Let's rewind and remind ourselves. Kairete o agatoi, or should I say, o lisanioi. Lisanios means agathos means good, like a good person. So I would Doricize this as Spartiatas lisanios iesan, Karteros, iskouros, Andreios. Now, something that is also certainly true is we're working from Attic and we're Doricizing it. It may not be possible to reconstruct every word or adjective in a Doric way. While a lot of things are attested, especially in things like Aristophanes, some inscriptional evidence, and a few regular spelling changes, we're really not sure what normal Doric would have been written like at length. So we're never really dealing with true Doric unless it's an actual Doric inscription in stone. Otherwise, we're seeing Doricized Classical Greek for the most part. And I say that because words like Karteros and Andreios, would they have been spelled or pronounced slightly differently? Like, would it be Andreios or Andreios? Would there be some kind of vowel change that I can't think of? Maybe. Or maybe it would be just like this.
Χούτο στρέσας εσυχώστε το χαΐμα πέο γκέιν. Πέι έντι χάτι ματέος.
Super cool. Lots of really good stuff. Biggest problem, I think, in this is the pronunciation, the mispronunciation of the h, the rough breathing, as ch. That really throws things off, especially because there's a decent possibility, even Horrocks suggests it as a reasonable hypothesis, that all three of those aspirates, not just t, but also k and p, had switched to ch, th, f, all three of them. So hearing this, when I hear ch, I kind of expect it to be the letter chi, that is, it has the modern Greek pronunciation like he. But in general, this is a more conservative interpretation, which I think is completely reasonable. In any case, it's not hutos, it's hutos, if we want to use at least the classical Attic pronunciation. Did Doric do these a little bit differently? Probably the long u vowel that ends up being u by late in the classical period in Attic is still closer to o, because there's no reason for it to raise so much because they still have an u vowel. In fact, that's another problem, because we have iskouros, fantastic that it's u instead of u, no reason for it to be fronted in Doric, but then the Omicron upsilon digraph, which is pronounced u in modern Greek and is also u for most of ancient Greek's history too, well, that should be u in classical Attic, and it shouldn't nearly be so high in Doric because they already have an u. It should be lower. It should be o, something like that, o. So hotos, something like that would make much more sense. Hotos, so that it stays far enough away from u, o, a. Three back vowels like Italian.
Χούτος τρέσας εσυχώστε το χαΐμα game.
Now, when she says trestes, which means a coward, it sounds like treses. I think she's just rushing through it. Also, essi doesn't sound like essi, it sounds like essi.
Χούτος τρέσας εσυχώστε το χαΐμα game.
So all the words in the English translation of her Greek, which is, of course, the translation of this, are you such a coward to avoid bloodshed, to yield so easily? Where is your honor? The second sentence, to yield so easily, cannot be found in the Greek here. She says, hotos, trestes essi, ostito haima peogein. For to flee, she says peogein instead of peogein. The first one is a true diphthong, the second one is not. The infinitive ending, epsilon iota nu, that we see all the time in ancient Greek, in Erasmian it gets pronounced ein, which is wrong. And it's wrong because it comes from epsilon u, that is ein. It's a long e sound, not a. It's not ein. It's ein, definitively that, all the way back as far as you can go.
Χούτος τρέσας εσυχώστε το χαΐμα game. Πέι έντι χατιματέως.
But then she says, super Dorically, pe enti hatimateos. Every one of those is a Doric word. Oh, it's so great. So let's start with the key word here, which is thema. In Attic, that's theme, the word for honor, such as the name Timothy, honor God. And in fact, we have a word at the end here that's not theos, but theos. Theos is used here to be equivalent to se or su. It looks like it's supposed to be something like that. So the way to say your as a possessive adjective in Attic, it would be he se time, he se time. In Classical Attic, this phrase would be pou esti he se time, or I'll write it in a way that represents the pronunciation of normal spoken Attic a bit better. Pousti he se time. Poust. Isn't that great? Poust he se time. Classical Attic is amazing. So, theos seems to be used like su, of you, a genitive form, because there is an adjective form that's Doric, which is theos, and thus we would expect thea as a ha, thea, thema, or something like that. I haven't found a reasonable precedence because the genitive form, to my knowledge, is more like theu or something like that, not theos, but I still think it's great. The first word, be, is just Doric for pou, and enti is esti. So awesome to see this Doric beautifully represented. Not perfectly, no, not perfectly at all, but beautifully, yes.
Χούτος τρέσας εσυχώστε το χαΐμα game. Πέι έντι χατιματέως.
You are worse than sophists. Let the rest of the world know, denounces you. No audio for that one, unfortunately.
Νυν πεϊρασόμεθα τα στέας δουνάμεως. Παρασκευάζεστε.
So, completely ignore what's written below. Fantastic quote, though, that might be, and real one, because that's not at all what she says. She said essentially this: Πειρασόμεθα τας θεος δυνάμεως. Παρασκευάζεστε. So, some great stuff, and some mistakes, or at least inconsistencies. The first word she gives is νυν.
Νυν περασόμεθα τας θέας δυνάμεως.
The way she's pronouncing it sounds really close to the classical Attic pronunciation. Nün. It could be nün or nün, some kind of rounded front vowel. That's a high vowel. It sounds really good, except, like we established previously, this should be nun, because Doric shouldn't be fronting that high back vowel u to ü, which is a trace of classical Attic and Koine. But again, there could be some dialect mixing in this character speech. That's not beyond the belief of historical possibility for someone to do that, especially someone who is the hegemon,
Και χαγεμόν των Χελένων.
of all the Greeks.
Νυν περασόμεθα τας θέας δυνάμεως.
Another bad thing, she says, peirasometa. She says, th, we keep that. That's definitely Doric. But she says the eh, which is, of course, terrible and should be stricken from all ancient Greek pronunciation. You heard me, Erasmians. Now, the tas, genitive of the article, equivalent to tes in Attic. Theos, again, looks like it's being used as an indeclinable genitive pronoun of you, or something of you, yours. And dynameos. Now, in Attic, it's spelled like this, dynameos, long os at the end. She doesn't do that. There are all kinds of alterations that are typical of Attic that aren't found in other dialects, and that is a quantity metathesis specifically. For example, Leos, the people from Laos. In fact, that form Laos is the one that continues to be popular with the Laos, with the lay people, with the people in the Koine period. A few of these Attic things just never catch on. But one that makes it into Koine is polios, which is from earlier poleos. Quantitative metathesis of the long e and the short o into short e and long o. Polios from poleos, which is from polevos. In fact, there should be a digamma, probably also in the Doric, because Doric still had the digamma when Gorgo was alive, at least if we can trust the inscription. So I would reconstruct this Dorically as dynameos.
Νυν περασόμεθα τας θέας δυνάμεως. Παρασκευάζεστε.
And then she says, prepare yourselves. Paraskeoaziste is more or less how she says it. Classical Attic would pronounce the zeta as zda, so the pronunciation of zeta, though, well, we see in inscriptions that's regularly delta, delta, because you have the zda, that was the metathesis of za in Proto-Greek into zda, happened sometime in the Archaic period before the Classical period. Now, the zda continues into, for example, Classical Attic and Ialic. In Doric, it ends up becoming this. Zda becomes the. So we would, in fact, expect paraskeoadesthe. That would be the way I would Doricize it. It's mostly attested on Crete, but it's also attested even in Koine era Doric dialect inscription. So I would definitely do that instead. If I wanted it to be pure Doric, but like we said, the first word is nün instead of nun. Maybe the reason for that is because this particular ancient character has a mixed dialect because she interacts with multiple Greeks. You know, I like this stuff. I want to try to give credit where it's due.
Νυν περασόμεθα τας θέας δυνάμεως. Παρασκευάζεστε.
All right, so what's written here is, you must not know Spartans only return with their shield or on it. And this is a real thing that apparently was said about the Spartans. The Spartan mothers would give the shield to their son and say, etan e epitas, which means etan, or, that is either this thing, it's a demonstrative use of the article, e epitas, or on this thing, either this thing you bring back or you come back upon it. Which reminds me of something very interesting that the historian Roald Kanijndijk said. In the 5th century BC, the standard practice was for Spartans to bury their dead away from the city, in the battlefield where they fell. So assuming this famous Spartan quote, which is attested much later, was something that was actually said in the 5th and 4th century BC in classical Sparta, and also assuming that this phrase means coming back dead on your shield and not just sick or wounded, since the use of the article as a demonstrative is similarly archaic, I don't think we'd expect to see that in Doric of the 5th century BC, but maybe centuries prior. That would confirm what Roll said in these videos, that the practice of bringing the dead back to the city was a practice that existed only before the classical period. If you know how to get in touch with Roll, let him know that I may have just legitimized this hypothesis.
Δουνατάχοι προύχοντες πράσουσι και χωί ασθενέis ξουγκορούσιν και χούτος το εγίγνετάι.
So what's written isn't exactly what she says. In fact, this is most likely the text that applies to what we just saw before, which was Nyun petasāmetha tas theos dynameos paraskeoadesthe. Instead, she says something super duper cool because guess what? This is another quote from history. It's from Thucydides. This is from his Historiae, from his histories. And this is not actually a Spartan quote, but an Athenian quote. It's what the Athenian embassy said to the Spartans. Like, hey, look, we already have this empire. And, we already did it. We already own all the islands. So you just let us keep all the islands. The strong do what they are able to do, what they can, and the weak suffer what they must. I mean, man, obviously the Spartans responded real well to that, you can imagine. Let's hear again how she pronounced it, because I liked some things she did.
Δουνατάχοι προύχοντες πράσουσι και χωί ασθενέis ξουγκορούσιν και χούτος το εγίγνετάι.
So she says, Dunata. Clearly, the person who transcribed this for her put a nice, convenient letter ni right in front of the delta there, so she wouldn't say dhunata or dhinata or dhunata or something else. It was written probably something like this, which would give the right pronunciation using the modern Greek orthography. She says dunata. Again, you see my transcription with the Roman letter U because that's how she's pronouncing it, and we'd expect that for Doric. Dunata. The possible things. But of course, she says the hoi sounds terrible. It's hoi, not hoi.
Δουνατάχοι προύχοντες πράσουσι και χωί ασθενέis ξουγκορούσιν και χούτος το εγίγνετάι.
But the person who wrote this out wasn't consistent, whereas the letter kai was pronounced just a ka, like a kappa before. An attempt to do the ka, but not getting it right. Here it's clearly cha, as in modern Greek.
Δουνατάχοι προύχοντες πράσουσι.
She also pronounces the letter nu plus the letter tau, ni plus taf, as nda, or just da, prúchondes. That's the modern Greek pronunciation, not at all right for antiquity.
Δουνατάχοι προύχοντες πράσουσι.
She says they do, she says prashusi, instead of prashusi, prashusi. Long vowel, double consonant, long vowel again, prashusi.
Δουνατάχοι προύχοντες πράσουσι και χωί ασθενέis ξουγκορούσιν.
Now, if I didn't know the quote, I would be very confused because I hear kai, hoi, as if it's two syllables. Again, I know this is the way to help trick the modern Greek I into reading oi instead of e, using that diaresis, which makes, of course, two syllables in the modern Greek mind, which is what it is also in the ancient Greek spelling. But it's not hoi, nor is it hoi, it's just hoi. Kai hoi, or in fact, koi, if we want to say it in a more conversational way, asthenes or asthenes, using a Doric pronunciation of that theta.
Δουνατάχοι προύχοντες πράσουσι.
And she says, astheneis. Oh, God, does that sound terrible? Oh, it's awful. Terrible. Oh, my gosh.
Δουνατάχοι προύχοντες πράσουσι και χωί ασθενέis ξουγκορούσιν.
This was also pretty confusing the first time I heard it because it sounds like she's saying kshugorusin. And I was just looking for a gamma. But of course, it's gamma plus chi. But the chi here has been converted into kappa to help this modern Greek speaker get close to the aspirate pronunciation, but not really. But of course, gamma plus kappa in modern Greek is just the sound of g. And she also had something to represent, as I have here, the Roman letter U, just u. So she said kshugorusi, because that's what was written. But it should be kshunkourusin, something like that. That's where the Thucydides quote ends. The rest here, kai hutos toi gignetai, is something that the translator must have added in, maybe taken from somewhere else. I don't recognize it. Hutos, thus. Notice the pitch accent and the long vowels. Hutos, that's how it should sound. She does it like this.
Και χούτος το εγίγνετάι.
Toi is, as you can see, it's just an enclitic particle. It means, you know, beautiful word. Hutos toi gignetai. And gignetai means it happens, it becomes, it is born. Hutos toi gignetai. Thus, you know, it happens. I guess what she's trying to say is, them's the breaks.
Άρες χαμέ απολέλω είπε. Hasparta esetai.
Fantastic. Sad way to end for Gorgo, but a nice quote because we get more Doric. We get ares, and then we get hame, which is in Classical Attic, hemas, us. Ares, hemas, or in this case, ares, hame. Words like hame are tested in Aristophanes, among other places.
Ares hame apolelo ipe.
Then she says, apolelloipe, has abandoned us. It sounds okay, except that this letter epsilon is way too long. It sounds like apolelloipe with an eta or something. So,
Hame apolelo ipe.
gotta shorten those short vowels. Apolelloipe, apolelloipe. You can still keep the pitch accent. Apolelloipe. And it would sound much better that way. Ha Sparta hesetai.
Hasparta esetai.
Sparta has been conquered. Great stuff.
Hasparta esetai.
Though for some reason she puts an accent on the second eta. Maybe there she did get instruction that it was a long vowel and interpreted the long vowel as a stressed vowel, and thus she stressed it, and it sounded the way it did. Not terrible. So what's my assessment? This is a really fun way to get introduced to the Doric dialect. I love that the voice actress is Greek. I love that the person transcribing this stuff, or maybe training the actress, got kind of sort of close to an approximation of what the pronunciation of Doric would probably be like. Lots of kudos all around to everybody involved. A lot of things that were very good, that were consistent. We heard them an attempt to do the aspirate, even though it came out with the wrong representation, and an attempt to do u instead of ü in a lot of places. Really fascinating stuff. If you want to learn more about the dialects of Classical Greek, see this. If you want to learn more about the changing pronunciation of Greek, see this video. Thank you again so much to LingoPie for sponsoring this video. The link's in the description if you want to sign up today. And thanks especially to each and every one of my Patreon supporters. Hygienate kai eroste.